Supply of urban land. The immobility of land means that the amount of land in terms of the surface of the earth is fixed within any community. It is often argued that real property markets are unique for that reason. While the total physical supply of land on the surface of the earth is limited, this is not of any great importance to the operation of real estate markets. In most urban areas, the opposite is the case. There is almost no limit to the supply of land for urban use. The supply of urban land can be increased by bidding land away from adjacent non-urban activities such as farming. Urban growth is generally the result of the conversion of land from rural to urban uses through the actions of real estate developers. The primary motivation for such expansion is economic. Farmers will sell to subdividers when they can get more for the land than it is worth in its agricultural use. In this way, agricultural land values set a floor to urban land values. The urban use must create a land value just higher than the farm value to induce a shift from one use to the other. Over time, urban land values can rise to be much higher than the original farm value. As long as farmers sell to subdividers, there is no effective limit to the physical supply of land available for urban expansion. Zoning restrictions impose a legal rather than a physical or economic limit. If more land is required for a particular purpose in the area, it can only be made available by converting land from some other use. The value of land is directly related to its use. Instead of occupying more physical space, it is possible to intensify the use of sites. This occurs when zoning regulations are modified to permit a greater degree of multi-story development. The first development of a vacant city lot might be a house. Many years will pass before this single-family residential area will change in character, but it is quite possible that expansion of the city may make this district suitable for apartments. The increasing demand for apartment sites will probably cause the lot value to rise to a point where it exceeds the value of the property in its use as a single-family dwelling. If zoning constraints allow, the site may then be purchased by a developer who plans to demolish the house and redevelop the property to an apartment use. Similarly, the supply of building sites can be increased by using previously unsuitable sites. For example, filling in lakes, swamps, and bays provides more building sites. Finally, greater speed and efficiency of transportation make sites that were previously too distant now suitable for urban development. Hope, Nanaimo, the Sunshine Coast, the Gulf Islands, Squamish, Whistler, and Pemberton may someday supply land for the urban development of metropolitan Vancouver. In conclusion, the fact that the land area in a region is fixed does not imply that the supply of space for urban activities is equally fixed. Thus, the old expression, "Buy land, they're not making any more," does not fare well under closer examination. Durability of improved land. A second important characteristic of real estate is the indestructibility of space and the durability of structures. While it is true that the owner of the fee simple holds external title to the property, subject to the Crown's rights, the space may become useless and lose its economic value. Farms which have lost their fertility and ghost towns in abandoned mining areas provide examples of space that is currently worthless, but once sold at premium prices. In other words, although land lasts forever, its value does not. Manufactured improvements to urban land are not indestructible. Eventually, streets erode, pipes rust, sidewalks deteriorate, and office buildings and houses decay. Nonetheless, these improvements are extremely durable. New housing units are only a small portion, seldom more than 1%, of the real property in use in any year. The existing stock of real property makes up almost all of the market at any one time. Any new units must, therefore, be developed in an urban area which is made up of several decades of individual real estate development decisions. The profitability of development of new property depends on current costs and market conditions, which are determined by current demand and the existing stock of real property. When considering the durability of structures, it is important to distinguish between the physical life and the economic life of the structure. Buildings may be demolished long before they have physically worn out to make way for a different class of development. This indicates that the value of the land and buildings for the old use is less than the value of the land and the building, or of the land alone, for the proposed new use. Real estate is a source of shelter. The shelter afforded by real estate, like other services, cannot be stored and must be in continuous production. An unoccupied building or a site which is seriously underused is a waste of a scarce resource. The physical durability of real estate, however, means that it has value as an investment and also as a source of shelter, freeing the owner from the need to pay rent. An owner-occupier of a house can value both the stream of consumer services the house provides and the potential for an increase in the value of the property in the form of a capital gain. Indivisibility of services. The value of a parcel of real property ultimately depends on its usefulness. This usefulness is based on the land and improvements such as buildings, sidewalks, landscaping, underground and above-ground utilities. The off-site improvements, including transportation amenities, utility systems, adjacent land uses, and views, also help to determine the usefulness of land. Elements of value cannot be separated into those derived from the land, the buildings, or the landscaping, since users regard the site as a single unit. This is reflected in the law of real property, where land includes the surface of the earth and all permanent improvements attached to it. In some cases, however, land and improvements are considered separately. North American real estate taxes usually assess land and improvements, buildings separately. In the case of the commercial investor, splitting the value of the land from the value of buildings is done for income tax purposes. Other circumstances in which land and improvement values are considered separately include determining the cost of replacing a structure if it is destroyed or when considering redevelopment of existing improvements. Divisibility of ownership. The ownership of a single parcel of real estate may be divided both physically and legally. For example, ownership of real property can be physically divided by creating separate interests in land, that is, establishing either horizontal or vertical boundaries. A standard subdivision into several serviced lots zoned for single detached residential is one example of horizontal division of ownership. A subdivision into individually owned apartments in a high-rise condominium project is a vertical division of ownership. A property owner may even sell the rights to the use of airspace above his or her property, another example of ownership which is divided vertically. Legal ownership of property may also be divided. For example, in strata developments, owners have exclusive rights to their own condominium suite, but share the ownership of common areas, for example, garden, hallways, pool, with all others in the development. A second example arises when a real estate owner rents property to a tenant, who may then rent or sublet it to someone else, creating three different interests in the same property. Finally, legal ownership can be divided through different types of ownership of one interest in land. For example, several investors may form a partnership to invest in real estate, or a company may be formed to buy real estate and shares in the company issued to individual investors. In these cases, the investor has an indirect interest in real property. He or she does not directly own a particular piece of property, but instead owns units in a partnership or shares in a company, which in turn directly owns the property. Divisibility of ownership is a very important characteristic of real property, as it allows a large dollar value asset, real property, to be broken down into smaller units of ownership. Hence, small investors are able to participate, and the opportunities to diversify, to buy a little share in many investments rather than tie up all of an investor's capital in one investment, are increased.